All right, folks, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And this episode of Craig McKim Networking is kind of coming from a spot where I've been talking a lot with my brother, who's law enforcement right now, active duty law enforcement, and he's coming up on retirement. And it got me really thinking about transitioning law enforcement, which then leads to thinking about transitioning military and, what is one to do, and even if it's not in, even if you're not thinking of necessarily the security work or, going that direction, I think you're really going to want to tune in and pay attention to what my guest has to say. Super smart guy, successful in law enforcement and successful in his new civilian life. So with saying that, I want to introduce my guest. I got to read this because this guy, I mean, he could have a resume as long as my arm just in training, let alone all the stuff that all the stuff that he's done on the job. So I'm going to read this just so I don't miss anything. But he's a protective services operations manager for Genentech, which is a biotechnology company based out of San Francisco. It's a division of Roche, if I'm saying that right. And he'll correct me here in a second if I didn't. He's a veteran of the United States Navy, where he was an intelligence specialist. Recently retired after 26 years of honorable service with the California Highway Patrol, holding the rank of lieutenant, serving also as the commander for the governor's protective detail. Prior assignments include SWAT team member. He's a computer crimes investigator, state narcotics agent, and a narcotics detection canine handler. He's also worked in private sector as a covert protection specialist for a family office, graduate of several executive protection courses. Now, as many as he had, I didn't realize that there were that many to be had. So I'm missing something somewhere. And he holds a degree, Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, and an MBA in Management. And again, that's just what I had time to read in one breath. But I would like to please introduce and for you guys to welcome Jerry Jacobs. Jerry, appreciate you being here, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
I hate hearing those the kind of the little bio read out, but put those things in there and
Well, but as you know, I could have gone on. I mean, like it's a mile long, so that's nice of you to say. But there's way more to say. There's way more to say.
Thank God you didn't go on, but it is what it is.
Right. So, we're going to get right into it. One of the questions this came up simply because you kind of followed like the little boy's dream. I want to go be a soldier. And let's use that term generically. I want to go be a soldier. I want to be a cop. I want to be a policeman. I want to serve. I want to do things for other people. I want to help. You really did that. And so, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Gosh, I grew up in Oklahoma in a very small country town on a farm. One stoplight, and all I want to do is get the heck out of there. I always thought like, hey, I was built for bigger things and being a farm boy and that. So when I was young, I was like, I want to be a helicopter pilot. I can just fly wherever I want to be. I'm going to join the military and all those things. I did join the military as soon as I graduated high school. I went through all the things, the different divisions. I was like, well, if I join the Army, I'll probably get stationed in Oklahoma. If I join the Air Force, so I said, you know what, I'm going to join the Navy, and there are no oceans here. It'll take me very far away. Yeah. So that's what I did. I was not a helicopter pilot because I just joined right out of high school, and I got offered 2 jobs when I met with after I did my ASVAB. It was, you can be an air traffic controller or an intelligence specialist. I'm like, okay, what do those jobs do? And the guy goes, I know what an air traffic controller is, but I don't know what intelligence specialist is. I'm like, that sounds like a cool job. So that's what I did. That brought me to California. I spent 4 years in San Diego back in the late 80s, early 90s. And that's kind of where I discovered what my next career was going to be after that.
So the plan as a kid was to be in the military.
Yes.
I mean, you could go on and on from there, but I mean, as a kid, like that's kind of like, if I get there, I've made it, kind of deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in the 80s, so you think of all the heroes of the 80s were all these military tough guys. It was Rambo, it was Chuck Norris, all that kind of stuff. It was
Sure.
all like, hey, if you want to be something great, you got to be in the military and stuff. And I had, my father was in the military, and there was my uncle was had retired as a Master Chief from the Navy, and he had a lot of influence on me. So yeah, it basically I fell in that kid's kind of dream, like, hey, I'm going to go off
Yeah. Yeah,
and
that's cool.
do
So
something.
okay, so you're in California. How do you land at CHP?
So first of all, when I joined the military, I thought this is my career. And then, as most things, outside looking in, once you get inside, it's a little different. The dynamics are different. I'm like, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I do.
Hmm.
But one of my good best friends to this day, I had met there. His dad was a sheriff, a deputy sheriff in Northern California, and he had to move some furniture from San Diego to his home in Sebastopol, California. So I went with him, and we were there for overnight. And he goes, "Hey, my dad's working patrol. Do you want to go on a ride along? I'll go with my dad. You go with one of the deputies." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds cool." The ride along just opened my eyes to this new like world of. I mean, we went to break-ins. We saw people, that had. It was just a tremendous amount of fun. And so as soon as I came back, I go, "Man, I think I want to be a cop. That was so much fun."
Uh-huh.
So that kind of changed my direction in life. And then how I wound up in the CHP was I had there was a law enforcement job fair at San Diego's convention center. So every agency was kind of there recruiting. This was in 1989, and so I took applications from everyone: LAPD, San Diego PD, San Diego SO, the CHP, all these kind of things.
Mhm.
So some I filled out. I didn't drive up to LA to do the LAPD exam. I did take the written test for both San Diego SO and PD and the CHP. I passed them all. San Diego SOs put me on a waiting list of a couple thousand people. I don't think I ever got a call back.
Right.
Um, San Diego PD, I passed the test. I did a follow up exam, and then at that time frame, my ship we were getting ready to go to Desert Storm, I think. And so we're doing through this sea trials where you're in port for a week, you go out to sea for a week and make sure everything. So it just so happened that the testing, San Diego PD, all the tests happened the week I was at sea. All the CHP test happened when I was in port. My thing was like, I'm going to go for the first people to hire me. It's just like, hey, I'm going to get the job. And
Mhm.
that's how CHP came kind of together.
Interesting. I'm a big believer in timing. Um, and kind of you landed probably where you were supposed to be. Especially for your from my perspective, considering how we met in the
Yeah.
protection industry, kind of where you landed. Like
Yeah.
that's a pretty big deal in that. So there's kind of a follow up, and I don't know necessarily. You know, I'd love to hear your path. I mean, because I know how I think of it as like, yeah, you started on patrol, and then
Yeah.
went to sergeant, and then the lieutenant, or how did the steps kind of, like, how did the promotion system work there, or like what was your, I guess better asked, what was your path?
Sure. So I mean, like every agency, you start with foundational training. So I went to the CHP Academy. This was in 1994 when I attended. And there they have basically they send out cadets to the CHP areas all across the state that they're understaffed, right?
Hmm, sure.
So you depending on when you went. When I went through the academy, almost everyone, the entire class of 120 people, went to one of the LA offices. The LA offices are huge. There's several. Well, I went to the South Los Angeles area with 15 of my classmates. So that's where I started. I did a probationary year there. Now, I came from Oklahoma. I don't know anyone in California. I don't know the areas other than a little bit of San Diego. But I was also on a ship that was out to sea for 2.5 years. But
Hmm.
so ultimately, it didn't matter to me where I went because it was all going to be new. Although I did have one friend who's who I met in the Navy. He was out and he lived in Northern California. So I said, well, I'm going to do my year in South LA, and I'm going to put in a transfer, a seniority transfer, and wait till I'm able to transfer to the Santa Rosa area. So ultimately, a good timing, like you said, was everything. I did my 1 year probation, and I got there right at 1 year. Prior to that, it would take about people 10 years to get there in seniority. So it just the CHP was growing so much and we'd been understaffed. So I went there.
Yeah.
So again, in patrol, and at that time, the timing was that the CHP had just merged with the California State Police in the middle of 1995. So we took over, the CHP took over all of the responsibilities of the state police, which included crimes on state property and protection of public officials, specifically the governor's protective detail and all the other constitutional officers, Secretary of State, the lieutenant governor, and down the line. So when I saw that first advertisement, I'd only been on the job for, out of the academy for about 13 months. I go, God, that's what I want to do. I want to be on this protective detail. I had no idea how the process of getting a special assignment worked. There is a very designated process where you write a memo request. It goes through your chain of command along with the resume. I literally wrote my resume, which I'd never had before. I made one up and I mailed it through the U.S. Postal Service directly to the unit. Completely short-circuited my chain of command, all that. They got it, and they're like, okay, we're going to give an interview at CHP headquarters in Sacramento on this date. Everyone I worked with was like, hey, how are you getting this interview? And I go, I just sent them a letter of my resume saying I want the job. I didn't know where CHP headquarters was. I had to ask, one of my supervisors, like, hey, where's CHP headquarters? Oh, this is the address in Sacramento. And okay. So I had I had a suit. I had a suit that I bought for court, and I showed up and completely bombed the interview. Now I look back and it was fairly simple questions, but I really did not do enough informational research on what protective details were all about. I remember they were like, hey, how do you move the governor and this and that? And so instead of like the term motorcade, I said parade. Oh, he goes around these parades. It was just such a disaster that, and of course I did not get the job,
Right.
But I came back and I talked to, we had all the former state police officers became highway patrolmen. So there was a former state police sergeant, now highway patrol sergeant, in my office. And I said, hey, Bruce, I interviewed this job. I didn't get it. How do I get that job? And he goes, well, you got to be in Sacramento. You got to know people, or you got to know people that are doing it so they know you. So the very first thing about networking was right there. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I want to go to Sacramento. And so I immediately put in a transfer for one of the Sacramento CHP offices. Got that. Again, in patrol. I just wanted to get to Sacramento. And then shortly thereafter, there was an opening for a uniform position in our Office of Capitol Protection. So basically, the Capitol Police there. Okay. So I interviewed for there after I'd been in Sacramento about 7 months, and got the job. Luckily, because they were bringing on, they wanted to expand that command. And I spent a couple of years there. That's where I was on the SWAT team. I did some investigative work, and I started to build my network that ultimately helped me out throughout my career, because I met two lieutenants there at the time who ultimately went on to be, the deputy commissioner of the highway patrol. Another was the chief, and all these things that I built this good working relationship that I was able to levy, from there. But really, most of the patrol assignments are done by seniority. Wherever you want to go, you put in a transfer request, and if you've got enough time on the job and there's a vacancy, you can go there. Specialty assignments like governor's protective detail, capital protection, any of those kind of things, you have to submit a memo with your resume, and you have to interview to get those. So that's kind of how that works.
So now, so Capitol Police, that would be considered a special assignment, yes?
Correct.
Okay. And then, so you didn't have to necessarily promote there. Like, so what was your first step in rank? If that, now I think I'd like to know that, but did that matter in how you got to where you ultimately ended up? I mean, because you said narcotics, like, was that when so patrolman, had you gone up, and did you get in because of that, or how did that work?
So as far as the promotion goes, I promoted from the field. A lot of you can promote from a specialty assignment. I promoted to sergeant, which is my first from officer to sergeant. I promoted from the field. I was a canine officer at the time,
Uh-huh.
working in Lake Tahoe. I think I'd had about I don't know, 14 or 15 years on the job at that time. I tried to promote once before just because everyone else was trying to do it, and I just, again, I did fine on the written test, didn't study, and I did not follow people's advice on the oral panel, because they make you do a written test, an oral panel, and they combine the scores and they
Sure.
rank
Yep.
you. I tried to promote it a couple times before that and just walked in and bombed the oral panel because I just didn't put any time into it.
Hmm.
Years later, I was a canine officer, and I kind of decided, I saw all these people moving up in rank that I just did not respect for various reasons.
Okay.
And I will say that when I was a younger officer, I did not respect my seniors as much as I should have. Looking back at it, I'm like, God, it was such a, not a very good troop at that time.
Right.
But as a canine officer, I said, hey, I'm gonna promote, mainly because I gotta, if I can't outrank them, I need at least kind of keep up with them, right, in rank, so I don't have to work for them.
Sure.
So I was successful at this point in time, passed the written test just fine, did better on the oral, and I was promoted to sergeant.
Okay. And that was
Luckily,
at this point, you said 14, 15 years that you've been in?
yeah, about yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was
Okay.
20, I've been 16 years.
Okay.
16 years when I promoted as
Okay.
an officer, working a bunch of different assignments,
Sure.
all that. So, but I was lucky enough because I promoted into a specialty assignment
Mhm.
because I was a canine handler, and the canine sergeant for the entire department was getting a transfer, so there was a vacancy, and I was the only person on the sergeant's list that was a canine handler, had that experience, because all the existing canine sergeants didn't want that job because it was not great because you're at headquarters. But
Yeah.
I was able to get that promotion,
Yeah.
luckily. So when I became a sergeant, I promoted not necessarily into the field. I promoted into a supervisor position, what they call the drug enforcement unit supervisor, which I supervised from a strategic level, canine operations, asset forfeiture, drug task force, the CHP's search and seizure policy, and there's probably another thing in there I'm forgetting, but
Yeah.
that's where I promoted into.
Okay. All right. So now I do want to go back to the
Yeah,
networking. Um,
yeah,
in your now, I don't know how it would go, so I'll just ask. Like in your day, so a couple things in your day to day, your every day of just work. Like wake up and there's no. I mean, whether you're on a special assignment or not, you're on working the road, whatever you were doing.
yeah.
Did networking help out in your job with the people in your job, but then also like the public and things like that? And then if so, how did that? And then did that potentially, because it doesn't sound like it, but did that help in the promotion process? And if so, how? So day to day, and then in your promotion process.
Sure. So there's kind of two different levels of networking, at least at the line level.
Mhm.
If you're an officer out there, patrol or whatever, and you're working in the field, a good network of knowing your community resources is super helpful, because it's about public service. So if you have a broad network,
Mhm.
where the pain points are in your neighborhood, in your um, area, so you can better service the public because you've got a good network. They're more open to talk to you. You know what resources are available, especially if you have one person that needs something, and if it's not something your job, police is best service for, you can say, we can't help you, but I know someone that can. You need this service, you can direct them that way,
Mhm.
right? And so that is that level. And as you go up in rank, certainly that broader range in the field, if you're in a patrol office, certainly helps at a board of supervisors and city councils, because you will interact with those people, and it can help out.
Mhm.
Internal networking is tremendous for special assignments, because a lot of the jobs I got, and I was very fortunate to have, is because I knew someone there. They knew my work ethic, they knew my background, and they were more likely to hire me. And I did the same thing when I was in a hiring position, both as a sergeant, I hired officers positions. When I was a lieutenant, I hired supervisors. So I would also really think, do I know this person? Do I know someone that knows this person? What are they really like? What is behind the resume that could be fiction, right?
I want to point out real quick what you just, like, literally what you just said was, um, do I, from your perspective, you said, do I know them? And so often in networking, people will say, well, I know this person, I know that person. So in this case, that you're, the people that you're hiring as sergeants, or the people that you're hiring, as a sergeant from patrol or whatever, like,
Right.
they may know you, but it didn't matter if they knew you.
Right.
They needed you to know them.
Right.
And I think that's the big, a lot of times people say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, there's some truth to that, but it's not who you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Of
That
course.
really sets you up for success. So I wanted to stop and kind of point that out, because you weren't making decisions on who knew you. That doesn't do you any good, or doesn't do them any good. But if you know them, does you good, but then does them better.
Sure.
Certainly from my perspective.
Yeah.
So now,
And also
yeah.
what you're known for, right?
Oh,
Because
sure.
right. I mean, you may know someone like, oh, I know them. I know them not to be someone I want to work with, right? So
It's always,
you
yeah.
got to be aware of past mistakes and how to address those with someone, because I've had people that and in my agency, some people have very long memories, and they'll go, oh yeah, I remember that guy from 20 years ago. He was a horror, he was not a good worker.
Huh.
So then you gotta go, okay, that's their, what have they done since then? Because like I said, for myself, I didn't think I was a very good worker when I was early on.
Hmm.
I learned things and I grew and I made myself a better person. And I wasn't doing bad things. I was just, insolent at times, but
Sure.
I learned to do things. So that's why it's what are you known for in that? Did they know you at a time that wasn't your best period in your life?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Um, so do you think, regarding your new, your now present career, do you think your rank at retirement had something to do, or I guess, did it have a big influence on this career, or the move, or where you landed, or the position you landed? And do you think, and if that's the case, do you think rank had more to do with it than the knowledge that you acquired? As, like, did it mean that we got a lieutenant, or we got a guy that operated as a lieutenant, so he has all these other skills that are more valuable to our company? So what was it, and do you, and to add on to that, do you find that that's sometimes the case? People want to say, we got a CHP lieutenant working for us, as opposed to, we have a guy that was a manager, was administration in a state run, in a state level, job, I guess. And
Yeah.
that's the guy that we want. We don't care if it was a lieutenant, but somebody that operated at that level.
For the job I got, they were looking for someone that knew about protective services in a management position to come up and manage a team.
Mhm.
So, I, I think definitely my background in working in protective services and the things I had done,
Mhm.
for instance, that was probably, 70% or 60% of it. And then I think the other 40% would probably be not necessarily a lieutenant. I mean, I could have been a captain, but it was that management experience,
Right.
right? So, I mean, theoretically, you could be a sergeant, and depending on your agency, and you do a lot of management, and how it really depends on how you articulate that.
Mhm.
But yeah, for me, I was lieutenant. I managed a team.
Mhm.
But I also had supervisory experience. I was a sergeant on the protective detail, so I knew that first line supervisory experience, and then a notch up for that. So, rank wise, depending on the type of job you're wanting or you're going for, that may be. If you're just in general security, they're like, oh, he's a lieutenant, he's a captain, he's an assistant chief. But honestly, in my experience, rank doesn't equate to knowledge, right? I mean, you can just find your way to move up, and it
Yeah.
really doesn't mean a whole lot.
Well, and also too, you could be a first-year lieutenant versus a fifth-year lieutenant,
Sure.
or any variation of that. For you're a rookie on the road, on first
Yeah.
year on the job, and you're a patrolman. But somebody who's got 10 years is still a patrolman. But
Yeah.
that but that 10 years, I mean, like that's like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Doing the work that you did. So that's there's a lot of truth to that. Doesn't necessarily mean knowledge.
Right.
So a rank doesn't hold knowledge necessarily. Um, so at what point did you really start focusing on networking, like, on networking, but also understanding where it might be for your retirement? Like kind of why did I don't know if you can answer that. Why at that time, or why did it come into focus? Did that all just happen? Was it just like all of a sudden, you look back and you're like, I got this network, and I'm looking at retirement in a few years. Like, it's time for me to really start pushing, or connecting, or acknowledging, or really using it, so I have my next move figured out before I have to make it.
Yeah. So no, I was very focused on that. I knew that I was going to retire at a certain date. This was my time I was going to do it. So I started really focusing on about 5 years out. 5 years from retirement, I really started. I was on the protective detail at that point. Been working. So then I started like, hey, I need to start uh, gaining more knowledge, building, uh, benchmarking, and building a network, because I like most cops, after a 30-year career or however long you do it, you've got great experience in crisis management and people skills, hopefully, and that. Uh, so you look at it, you could turn in a job application to someone and go and say, like, they would say, wow, this guy is really qualified, but I don't know who he is. I've never met him. I don't know who he is. Or you can say, same guy. It's like, great resume, all the skills. I've known him for about 3 years. I met him at a conference. I've reached out to him for information and to help, and he's always been super helpful. So right off the bat, you're like, well, go with the guy, right? He's been there. He's been around. He's putting in the time, and so they're more than just that sheet of paper there. So I picked 5 years to start working on meeting people and learning from them, and just trying to get out there and learn as much as I could ahead of time about what the private sector is like.
Right. Okay. So you had said kind of earlier in that answer, you wanted to gain more knowledge. And so I was wondering, right, that was kind of my next follow-up, was like, what were you looking for? And I think, and you just answered it there, of like, how does the private sector work?
Right.
And did you now, so kind of going into that, did you consider other possibilities? Now, I have, in my notes here, I have like chief, someplace, a lateral move, or like a totally different industry. Like, you could have gone in probably a lot of places, non-security related, that had, technically nothing to do with your law enforcement. But management is, I think, to some point, is management. So was there any other thought as to what, I mean, I'm sure there was probably a lot of thoughts, but
Yeah.
what were some of the things that you considered with your background and the network that you had built?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of things in my career, tried a bunch of different things, worked in different areas, narcotics, the tactical stuff, and all that. But when I fell into protective services, it was like I finally discovered where I was supposed to be, and that's I love doing. I loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the type of work. So when I decided to retire, you always think like, I could sing around, let maybe get captain. I was on the captain's list of that, do a little longer, but ultimately I said, you know what, I need to just what makes me happy,
Mm.
and yeah, doing protective services work. So I that was my plan, but I also considered not doing anything, just retiring, just living off my pension, which is a very nice pension, and
Mm.
maybe traveling the world with my wife, or just focusing on day-to-day happiness. Because that's
Perfect.
what really we should all be looking for, is what makes you happy. Is
Mhm.
it rank? Is it money? Is it the job you do? Because I've met people all over the world that are super happy, and they don't have all the comforts and money and all these kind of things. So my wife and I really considered just, hey, let's just enjoy what little amount of life we have left.
I, and it's funny because I think we may have had that conversation at a conference one time, or maybe we were on the phone, and that was something that I think you were still mulling over. This is probably a few years ago, that you said, and I had kind of forgot about it. But as soon as you said that, like, I don't know, we might just go do nothing for a while and see how that
Yeah.
feels. And I was like,
Yep.
well, that's kind of novel. Like that's,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I did when you said it, that absolutely spurred my memory. I was like, wait a minute, I think we've had this conversation before. But also, to your point of being happy. I mean, how many people are in your in the job that you're doing, and they're not happy.
Yeah.
And they, the next career, if they're not, it's like the job, being happy with rank, being happy with money should, like, that's fine. But when you have to know that, and you have to be willing to be honest with yourself with that, because if that's what makes you happy, like go do it.
Yeah.
Because I think you find a lot of non-happiness. I know we kind of gotten off networking here, but I think a lot of people will say they're happy while they're not pursuing what truly does it for them. And whatever it is, like, go do it.
Yeah.
Accept it, admit it to yourself. You can lie to everybody else, just don't lie to yourself, and go be happy with that. So the fact that you found something that was, one, constructive, and two, that you, like, I belong here. In your retirement, you said you don't have to work, but now it's almost like, I would almost say, put these words in your mouth of, like, I get to work, as opposed to, I have to go do this kind of thing, which I think a lot of people are in. So, which is also why you build a broad and vast network, not necessarily in your industry, or directly, like in law enforcement. Like, you went out and you met other people and you did other things, and so, like, having a very broad network is going to mean something to you. And Will, like, you and I, well, not that we met by chance, but like the things that I've been able to do over the last, maybe say, let's say 5-6 years, have come from all the networking that I had done prior. And you said earlier, I started 5 years. You picked 5 years for whatever reason. That's what works for you. It's like, well, networking takes a while. If you have a job, like, to build solid relationships, it takes time, and you have to value the relationship in and of itself, because it may never lead to anything in dollars and cents or whatever it is that you're looking for in life. But you don't know that. No conversation's insignificant. And I was at your wedding by chance, and in Vegas, and that's how we met. So
Yeah. Right.
so you don't know, and I'm glad we stayed in touch. So, due to networking, were there, like, when you finally took the job where you are now, were there other things that were on the table? And I think I kind of have a list of questions behind that.
Yeah.
But I think I just want to stick with that one. What was it? Were there multiple possibilities, and why did you pick where you are?
Yeah, so I mean, in Northern California, there are a ton of executive protection PS opportunities constantly going, and I had applied for
And real
a
quick,
couple.
PS is
Yeah,
protective services. Yes,
protective services.
I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
want to make
yeah. I
sure
mean,
everybody
depends
who's
on,
listening understands that. Yeah.
yeah, depending on what you want to call it. Our team, calls it protective services. Some people call it leadership support, but
Mm-hmm.
it's basically executive protection by
Right. Sure.
other terms.
Mm-hmm.
So I had, put in for other jobs at right around that time. Didn't get them because I'd made, you know, um, little mistakes and learning to how to adjust from how I want to talk about my background when I'm sitting for these interviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
So
there were there other
can
things.
you explain
Yeah.
that real quick, about that? Just, I mean, the people that are listening, that might be, like, how did you frame it, or what did you, like, what
Right.
did you do, or if you're willing to share, like, what was maybe
Sure.
a mistake that you made that you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it that way next time.
Right. Yeah. So one perfectly. I was interviewing for a very well-known tech company at for a very high level. I was certainly qualified for it. And I remember the first interview, I think, was with the hiring executive. And I think it was, hey, tell me about your background. And instead of talking about all the stuff I had done in protective services and really what they were hiring me for, to be their director of executive protection, I went off and talked about all the other stuff I'd done on the high patrol, as far as the stuff you kind of read, SWAT and investigations, all this. They weren't hiring for that. They don't care about that. Yeah, that's nice, but in that initial thing, talk about what what you bring to the table that's about that job.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what I don't know what I was thinking, because that was my first big time interview. But I really, and then I went through 6 more interviews. I got a little better each time, but by that time I had already screwed up, because the hiring manager said, yeah, this is not what we're looking for.
Knew you as a retired cop that talked about cop stuff.
That's exactly right. I talked about a bunch of cop stuff.
Yeah.
That instead of talking about the high level, executive protection I had done, which is what they're hiring for.
Right. So if you're listening to this, you're in law enforcement and you're looking to make a change. That's great that you got the resume and
Right.
that you've done the things you've done and you served, and that is to be honored. Like, obviously my brother is, my dad was.
Yeah.
So wide respect, but pay attention to what they're hiring for, so that you're talking about the right stuff during those interviews as they come.
Yeah.
So
speak to what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But out of that experience, and then I rolled into the next interview, I was much more on point, and all I talked about was I looked at what they're looking for in their job sheet, and I spoke to all those points. I spoke to protective services experience, executive protection, spoke to management and leadership and developing teams and training and all that stuff, that I just distilled that down, all the things I'd done into that, and I was ultimately successful, and it's been great. So
yeah. So, and clearly you're digging where you are. I would say, and so that's awesome. You can get a second career in some place that you like to be, with a company that you like to be with. You can't beat that.
right.
So, this is kind of a broad question, so answer it how you will, but how do you approach networking?
Well, first of all, I suck at it. I'm just
That's not true,
horrible.
Jerry. That's not true.
Yeah. Well, well, the reason is because I keep trying, and my wife is super good at it, and I watch her.
She is a dynamo. She's the
Yeah.
best. She's awesome.
I watch her, and then I will try and emulate her, and then I will get her to give me feedback on that. She's like my little bit of crutch, and then like, hey, I'll ask, hey, how do you think? She's you're a little shot out of the cannon. You need to tone it down, or this or that. Not so much about you, make it about them. Just kind of really like coaching me right there, and
Sure.
like a hot wash. Okay,
Yeah.
but the big thing is I just keep doing it. I just put, I push myself out of my comfort zone to get better at it. And it's actually paid off. I mean, the reason I have this job I have now is because of a networking event. I mean, it's not the only reason, but that was a key.
So would you, understanding everything you've done, and you, you don't just walk into a job like you have, certainly not with all the competition that would be happening in that area because of all the industry that's there. But do you feel like, I don't know if I'll hurt feelings on this one or not, but do you feel like all your time at the range was better spent to get this job, or your time networking was better spent to get this job?
Well, tactic, and tactically, and all the training, that is a very small portion of it. It's definitely the network and the softer skills that really gets there, especially at the management level. All those things, what they're asking you to do to lead people and to build teams and all that stuff, and engage with executives and build that credibility. They have no idea if I'm a good shot or not. They know at one point I carried a gun for a while, and we respect that. But honestly, It is how I communicate and at that level, right? And to build that credibility, right? Because they're going to believe what they hear with their ears and see with their eyes, not necessarily what you're, how you were before. But key to this job, certainly, it was networking and the things that I had done around that, as far as building that.
Sure. So now you're at a management level, right? So
Yep.
that's what you're doing, but you've also done the work.
Yep.
You've been a body, you've been AIC for somebody
Yep.
very high ranking, right? You've done other works. You were covert. What about then? Is it being out of the holster fastest? Is it being, making sure you get to the gym, all day, every day, or making sure, I mean, obviously all this stuff is important, right? You have to
Hmm.
have these other skills. But even to be the driver for the executive, or to be, covered, to be advanced for them, where you're out doing the work every day, as as an agent, and you're not managing anybody except yourself while you're out there. um is it still, the network? Is it more, is more time at the range, more time in the gym and the dojo, all that stuff? Does that raise and does that elevate in importance, or is it still, would you say it's still the network? And I seriously, you know I please, something, honest. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm leading here, but I want you to slap me down if I'm wrong.
Well, it depends on where you want to work, right? So if
Hmm. Hmm.
what part of this industry do you want to work in? Do you want to be a gunfighter in a high threat area? Then they're gonna put a premium on. Hey, can this person hit the targets they aim at consistently and safely, right? Because that's their importance, right?
Hmm.
Because we're going. You don't need to talk to anyone. You just need to be a gunner, right?
Sure.
Or if it's a you're in a certain part of the industry, maybe celebrity, where you're they put a premium on these big, strong guys and that are buffed out. Well, I want to work there. Well, then I need to put a premium on, mean mugging and lifting a lot of heavy weights around, right? So you got to decide that. But if you decide, hey, I want to work in a corporate environment, I want to be around billionaires and things like that. Certainly, there's a percentage that you want to have good skills, but and keep those up to date. But the vast majority of it is going to be networking and persuasion, right? Because it's how you speak to people. So you need the networking to find those jobs, get recommended for those jobs. But it's also how you navigate the corporate ecosystem or the family office, as being networking with the executive assistant, maybe all those kind of things that a lot of times you get trapped up on. Hey, well, my network is about getting jobs. Well, your network is also about the office and who you know within that to get things done. Because if the boss says, hey, I need to do XYZ, and you go, I have no idea who in your circle or this office or this corporation does that,
Hmm.
then it's like, well, you really don't know what my life's about.
Right, and you cut your value, I mean, quickly, and I don't know by how much, but it has to be a lot.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I look at that. I work for a large corporation, and I haven't been here very long, but every day I'm trying to learn more about how the organization works, who are the people that I need to know, and then one step beyond that, and so then I'm trying to build that relationship, introduce myself, um, explain what I do, how I can do for them, find out what they do, and how we interconnect. So even though I'm hopefully in the last job I'll ever have to get, but I still want to do the best job I can, and I do that also through internal networking.
Sure. Networking at work, I believe
Yep.
it's wildly important. And so, I
Yep.
mean, my next question for you is you kind of got into it right there. Is how important is networking to you? To your business, like in your business and what you do, and how is it? This is kind of a redundant question. Is like, how has it impacted your career? But how has it impacted, on a broader scale? How has it impacted your life?
Uh, Much more than I ever thought possible. In law enforcement, you can kind of get siloed into your own little thing. But as I grew and found out I want to be more than that, I mean, it really got me my specialty assignments on the job. It got me and on the protective detail, it got me it, it got me married. I mean, through a network, connected me with my future wife. I
Is
mean,
that right?
yeah,
Wait,
a guy I was working with had met Jennifer and said, "Hey, there's someone you really need to meet," and that. So that was kind of a networking,
but
and then
you
of course
you
this
should
job.
probably be thanking that guy probably about quarterly. If I I'm speaking truth here. Um,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah, I mean, and that is big. I mean, that's obviously probably one of the biggest steps you take in your life is,
Yeah,
finding the right partner. And, in this case, we're talking about guns and cops and security and executives, but then in your life where you spend most of your time, like that, like, you know, networking somehow affected. And probably at the time you weren't
right.
thinking of it that way, but like obviously it's on my mind all the time. And so like, but that's how it can happen. I'm responsible for introducing to essentially marriages. So I feel good about that. And there's people that have
Great.
done way more of that, and I don't think of it that way, but it's just like, well, when I was networking, I introduced this guy and this girl, or when I was just working, introduced those two,
Yeah.
and it took off from there.
I
Um,
mean that is exactly kind of what networking is about. If you take your it's if you take yourself out of it, as someone that as a connector, you say, I have someone that needs something or someone. I've
mhm.
met someone that has those skills or this personality that matches. Allow me to introduce you, and then that's kind of what it's about.
You take it from that. Yeah, I just made an intro to mutual friend of ours, Dave Hop,
Mm,
with a new contact of mine who was in the same area, couldn't get into EP work um, for about a year and a half because he was on a full-time assignment, and he's
hmm
like, it would have been a conflict of interest. But now I'm no longer on assignment, same company. He goes, but I want to, and he's in the DC area, and he's like, I want to keep my skills sharp in EP. So I was like, well, I know a guy who's a good dude and who has a
Yeah,
company and who does work. Like, let me get his permission first. And Dave's like, yeah, of course, man, send him. So
yeah,
I put those two together, and I don't know where it's landed. I know that at least one email was exchanged, but that was it. And like you said, to take yourself out of it. So often I got hit I think it was two conferences ago. So it wasn't 2019, the last one we had,
yeah.
but 2018. And this guy, I don't remember his name. I think he was from New York. Handed me his card. He goes, "Hey, if you're in New York, let's do business." Okay. Never introduced himself.
Yeah.
Was like, "Hey, let's start it off with let's do business," instead of like, "Hey, what's your name?" Or
hmm
where are you from, or how did you get here, tell me about yourself. Like, there's a myriad of things that he could have said, but it was let's do business. So it was like, kind of let's benefit me before we do anything.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't have his card. I didn't bother with it because that guy clearly wasn't interested in getting to know me. um,
Right.
and so that was just kind of moving on. But you know you had said the internal networking again. You were networking with other cops, whether that was, supervisors or whomever, or just other cops or whoever. You were networking within your community to find other
Yeah.
opportunities. And I think, you don't, it doesn't have to be in preparation for your next career, but certainly it can be in preparation for your next move within the same company or the same agency or things like that too. And I think
Yeah.
that I wanted to point that out because I think that sometimes gets overlooked.
Yeah.
But um, what else? So I think I'm going to ask this question. So if there's something else that comes to your mind, but like, what
Sure.
else have you gained due to networking? And my first thought was, I wonder how he met. I wonder how he met his missus. And now I know. But is there
Yeah.
anything else
Yeah.
that you can think of that maybe loosely tied to it, or that you would just say, yeah, I wasn't thinking about it at that point, but yeah, because I was doing this or that, this is what I got out of it,
The
or
biggest thing
what I
I've
provided to somebody else, what I was able to give
yeah,
somebody else.
right. First of all, I say the biggest thing and I value the most out of networking is I've met some really good friends. I
Mhm.
mean, you're my friend. I've got just a ton of just people all over the place that are just good friends that uh, I want to help them. I don't need anything in return. I want to see them successful, and it just, um, yeah. And even if I haven't met someone reached out to me on LinkedIn or wherever, and they say, hey, yeah, I want to get into EP or this or that. Can you give me a tips? Hey, I'm happy to help you. Let me point you this way, whether it's through a mentorship, an ASIS or IPSB or any of those things. Hey, I don't need anything in return. Just you know um, I want them to be successful, and I do get a lot of satisfaction out of that,
Mhm.
outside of the jobs or this or that, that I've been fortunate enough to have, because I've been very lucky to have a good network and have met the right people at the right time, because like you said, timing is key to a lot of things. So that's yeah, that's what I see is I just met a lot of great people out there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it comes
That's
through
kind of
put
why
yourself out there.
that's I've kind of stuck, I realized that the type of people that executive protection or personal protection, corporate security, all the variants of it, um, put me in touch with a lot of like-minded individuals. Not always, but it's fairly tight. It's fairly tight knit because it's not a huge industry, and I'm not a big part of it. I'm just like a guy who talks about networking, who happens to be in the industry. So I speak the language. I've done the job and things like that. But it's like, I've gotten to, I get to do, or I get to instruct at EPI,
Yeah.
because of, well, one, I'm a alumni, but also because I continued to work that network that I had. Um, I got to, I'm on EP Access now. So, because I networked with Christian four
Sure.
years ago, because I had reached out to Kristen Leonardson a year before, saying, hey, this was like early 2016. I'm like, hey, if the conference is coming to Vegas this year, like at the time I was there, I'm like, if
Yeah.
I can be, I don't care if you want me to schmooze somebody, if you want me to take coffee to something, like, I don't care. I just want to be involved. I just want to help. And because I did that, I then, I was asked to, put some ideas down on paper and send it off. So I did, which got me a conversation with her and Chuck Randolph. And, they evidently took my notes with them to the board meeting, and whether they got, I don't know how it fit in, but I asked Christian about that. And he goes, yeah, I remember that. He goes, yeah, they were there. Like, I saw some of those. And so and that was just me wanting to take whatever I can do. Just, I want to help, which, eventually led to me, being invited by Christian to do my networking presentation in class on EP Access. So, that's that just from networking. And again, you picked 5 years. I met, Christian 4 years ago. I met Kristen about 5 years ago. So that's just kind of how it goes. So you had mentioned like giving tips and things like that. What are your like top three tips for networking, whether in the industry or just in general?
I think being former military and law enforcement,
Hmm.
a lot of times when I think about those people and my own background coming into the networking thing, and it applies across, you got to drop your shields, right? Because a lot of
Mm,
times, especially on your background, you can be very suspicious of people, and you got to drop the shields, and
hmm.
and you also got to realize that people get to the same endpoint using different paths. They don't all have to be like you. And a lot of times, y- you know, uh, it's funny. Byron Rogers will say, at times, his is like people like, oh, what's your background? And they want to hear, you're kind of law enforcement, special ops, this and that. It's like I've met some people that are amazing at this job that were never in law enforcement or military.
Hmm.
I want to know about how where you're at. You don't have to take my same path. I can't take your path because it's unique to you. But we just got to realize that when we speak to people, if they're if they were a chef one day and now they're an EP manager for, hey man, that they got there some way, and they should be listened to and network and what they can do.
Hmm.
Um, and then also in networking. Uh, First you got to realize how important it is, but also you're only good as your last game. So a lot of people rely so much on what they did years ago.
Hmm.
I was, SWAT ninja for this many years, and I did this many search warrants and blah blah blah. Or I was SEAL Team 27. What it is like.
Yeah.
Man, awesome. I respect that. Thank you for your service. All
Yeah.
those things. What about moving forward and what we do in this kind of thing, and how can
Uh,
we work together and all that? And you know,
yeah. When's the last time doing an EP assignment you kicked in a door?
yeah, right. Yeah.
You
I,
know,
I
like,
mean, the door could have been jammed and you need to give them help in there, but
when you
as
knew
you're,
how, yeah.
do you need an explosive breach it? I don't think so. So,
Hopefully not. Not, yeah. And thank you for bringing that into, like, bringing that back to, military law enforcement, because at
yeah,
the beginning you talked about the transitioning. So thanks for taking that cue and kind of giving that. It's, and I got to think, it's tough, when you're in when you're in an alpha world, like cops kind of need to be like, there has to be confidence oozing out of you when you're out there. Otherwise you
yeah,
could get eaten up, I suspect. And, and that's just by your own people, let alone the criminals out there and things like
yeah,
that. Or the difficult citizens that you're talking to. And then in the military too. I mean, like, that's just like, people, I mean, they can be rough, and, and you're in bad places. And so, just being, I'm going to call it authentic, but also, I mean, a sprinkling of being vulnerable. And,
yeah.
I mean, nobody likes that. I mean, let somebody see my weakness, or not weakness, but sometimes a weakness, like, or a
Sure.
perceived weakness. I'm sorry, that's better said. A perceived weakness by you, which might be one of your biggest assets, because whatever it is that you feel about something in particular might be exactly what that person needs on their team,
Yeah.
needs to hear that somebody else is going through or dealing with it. Like, okay, I'm not as screwy as I thought I was, or boy, I really, like, I gained confidence listening to somebody else talk about that the same way I feel about it. And so, like, that's got to be tough. But I couldn't agree with you more. Is that, like, that's a good way to put it, especially considering what who we're kind of addressing here, is lowering the shield
Yeah.
instead of being a cop, being a soldier, marine, airman, sailor, all that. Like,
Right.
you're not Jerry the retired cop. You're Jerry the guy from Oklahoma who
Right.
went and, like, has kind of crushed it through his career. And I'd like to know kind of how he did that. And, what is a guy, how does a guy like him think? And what does a guy like, what does he think about the world? And, what does he like to do
Yeah.
for fun? Because, maybe that's the best way that we're going to connect, because we both like to golf, or we both like
Yep.
to whatever, and so
Sure.
that's important. It's tough to do, but valuable, but valuable. And that's kind of the
Yeah.
end of the statement. So what, so those are great. What do you kind of said it before, like, this is the last job that you have to get. So, what is next for you? Like, foreseeable future, what are you looking forward to?
Okay, I right now I'm really focused on what I'm doing in my current position. I'm building a team, putting a lot of effort into building culture, knowledge, and growing both each individual on the team, helping them reach their goals individually, whatever that is. If it's the best practitioner on this team, or they want to go somewhere else in the industry, I'm really focused on that, and then coming together with coalescing them all together, and working to really build a really top team. And I'm very excited about that, because when I in my previous career, I came onto an existing team that and worked and supervised that, managed that, and you take an existing team into different directions, um, and bumps and bruises, and look at the future. But this is a little different than that. That it's a team that is changing roles and growing, and I'm super excited about it. So um, I like that a lot. So that's right. What's really next for me is
Yeah. So that's interesting, because I wonder if 10 or 15 years ago, like, that answer would have been similar in message of, I'm looking for, I mean, because at this point, really, I mean, if there's a place where you've made it, like, you're kind of there. so now what is your duty? You know, I mean, you got to continuously improve and grow and things like that.
Yeah.
But how do you, what are you doing for the next generation? And
Yeah.
that's where you went right to. And like, you've been in management, but that was leader talk. That was leader speak.
Yeah.
Of, I'm trying to build them up. I'm trying to make, trying to bring them together and all these things about the team that you're growing. So from as far as, my opinion goes, that's where you're going to gain regardless of the role that you're in, because we all have to continue to grow and change and things like that. But what are we willing to do for the people that are, really that are around us? Because, if you make them, if you bring them together in the way that they should operate as a team, and the culture, and you're bringing all that in, it can only, you do good for you by helping them do well for them.
Right.
And so and that you're in the fact that you're excited about that, like I think that's cool, and just the hallmark, a hallmark trait of a leader, and a good one. So they're lucky, I believe, to have you where you are, and because it's not always like that, as like, it can be that, detail leaders can be tough, agents can be tough, but they're make sure they know. Bring me in, I'll tell them how lucky they are, man. So anyway, but so thanks for that. We're wrapping up here. Is there any parting thoughts that you want to share with with the folks that are listening, be it law enforcement or just who, or is there anything?
I would just say, put in the work, put in the network, because you gotta figure out where you want to be, and then network with the people that are there, and just be open to new things, new ideas, and don't be overly reliant on things in your past. They're support, but you're going forward, and you need to be forward thinking, and that's what I would say.
Excellent. Cool. Well, sir, I appreciate you taking the time here on a Saturday afternoon, on a holiday weekend, no less.
Yeah.
And that was great, man. I appreciate it. I'm sitting here making sure like I didn't miss anything, and I think we're pretty good, and love the conversation.
Awesome.
As always. I always feel smarter coming out of conversations with you, whether they're online, or whether they're side by side at an NLA dinner. And so I appreciate it so much, and please, the best to your missus from me. So
Absolutely, my
yeah,
pleasure. Thanks
cool.
for having me on.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, folks. If you like this, if you want to talk more about, or you want to hear more about transitioning military law enforcement into a new career, one, I'm here for you as in networking. Jerry and I are both on LinkedIn. I'd love to offer any assistance that I can. Please, and when you see this video, comment on it, or you have to hear the audio, please let me know your thoughts. I'd love hearing it. But until then, it's all I got. I hope you have a great one, and talk to you real soon.